In this section, we'll be adding a couple more finishing touches to our monument before we're finished. This will include adding these rebar type supports to make it look more like a concrete statue, and then we'll color it like concrete, and then we'll add some text to dedicate this monument to the book that we were making it for. To do this, we'll be using a couple of box primitives to create little pieces of rebar. We'll then be using the material library to add some colors to our rebar and other components. We'll use a rectangular pattern tool to make a lot of these pieces of rebar very fast, which will save us a lot of time. And then we'll be using the move tool to move a bunch of pieces into place so it looks like there's rebar on the inside of our sculpture. Lastly, we'll use a smart primitive to add text to the front of our statue, dedicating this entire monument to our book. In order to make this monument look a little bit more realistic, we'll add some metal supports that'll hold up this profile of Mexico. That way it doesn't look like it's floating in midair. To do this, we'll use a box primitive from our primitive tab, and we'll change its dimensions so it's only 0.5 millimeter wide or so, something very skinny. We'll then place it underneath our profile. Next, we'll want to add a material because we're about to duplicate this many times, and we don't want to have to add a material for each duplicate. To do this, I'll select the piece of metal, and then I'll select the material library, and then I'll use brushed metal or some other metallic texture. I'll close it, and voila, we have our metal support now. Next, we'll use the rectangular pattern tool from the pattern tab to create many duplicates of this. With this selected, we first click on the solid we wish to duplicate, then we select the direction selector, and we click on a direction we want to duplicate it in. I'll just use the bottom of our support, the edge specifically pointing left and right. I'll click on that, and voila, we can start duplicating. First, we'll drag this arrow to the right to create a larger area where this pattern will be made, and then we'll drag this plus or minus slider to the left to create more duplicates. We can also adjust the number of duplicates in the window. Okay, so the supports we just made though are still sticking out on the right side, mainly these 4. I'll use the press pull tool from the modified tab to push them back down, so that way they don't stick up as far. With the tool selected, all I need to do is click on the 3 surfaces I can see, being the tops of our rebar, and then just pull this arrow down. Now that they're inside of our profile of Mexico, it doesn't really matter. For this one though, I can't see the top, so what I can do is I can just use the move tool, just move the entire thing down. These supports help this statue look a little bit more realistic, like it can actually stand up now. To make it look even better though, let's add some color to it. I'll open the material library by clicking on the material button on the top of our screen. I'm going to use a wood texture actually, and then apply a really gray overlay, and this will make it look kind of like concrete. I'll then click on the different parts of our statue to change their colors to this kind of concrete texture. Now that we've applied our concrete stone texture, it would look more appropriate if we added some sort of rebar on the inside to hold this all together. To do this, I'll make a piece of rebar out of a box primitive. We could also use a cylinder primitive, but it's going to be awfully small, so it won't matter. I'm going to adjust its length and width to only 0.5 millimeter, so it's very thin. Like with the rest of our metal rebar and supports, I'll apply a metal texture to it before I begin duplicating it. Now to duplicate this, I'm going to use the Control Copy and Control Paste commands. That's Control C on your keyboard and then Control V. This will make a second copy with the move tool already active on it. I'll go ahead and move it up into our sculpture and then rotate it slightly. Make sure to deselect your part after you've moved the new copy. And then to make a second copy, we'll go back, reselect our part, and then push Control C to copy it, and then Control V to paste it again. I'm going to do this process over and over to create kind of what would look like some sort of internal metal structure that would hold this all together. I'll just keep moving these around and making copies of them until our statue looks pretty good. For the parts that have fallen off, I can even add some sticking out of it to make it look like it was attached. Our monument's looking pretty good, but still needs some sort of text to help signify what it's a monument to. Before I show you how to add text to this monument, I'll get rid of this extra little piece of rebar we have sitting here off to the side, just by clicking on it and then pushing delete on my keyboard. The way text is added in 123 Design is through the use of a smart primitive. To find this smart primitive, you'll have to open up the kits on the right side of your screen by clicking on this arrow, and then making sure you're selected on the primitive kit. There's a lot of different kits here, but this one has the text in it. Under the Smart Primitive tab, the first option should be text. Just click and drag that onto your screen. The text Smart Primitive is a little intimidating because of all these arrows, but let me just simplify it for you. Everything in the bottom left corner of the text, the arrows, the movements, those circles, all of that is just for moving the position of the text. The other three arrows are for controlling the dimensions of your text. If you drag one of them, it won't apply the new text dimension until you click the Apply button at the bottom of your screen. At the bottom of our screen, we can also edit the text dimensions. Here we can also select the font and what the text says. In this case, I'm going to write Cristobal Nonato, which is the title of the book we're making this monument to. I'll also take this moment to adjust the dimensions so our text is a little bit wider by dragging this arrow here to the right. After I do that, I will click on Apply to apply all of our changes to the text. To actually move the text around, we could use the Move tool, but since we're trying to get it flush on a surface, I can also use the Snap tool. The Snap tool is a pretty cool tool. All you have to do is click on it on the top of our screen. It looks like a magnet. And then you click on the back of the object. I'll click on the back of this L. And then I'll click on the face of our monument, and it'll just automatically paste it to the monument. Not only does the Snap tool move it there, it also groups it with the object that we pasted it to. This doesn't mean that it's attached to it, it just means that if we tried to move the object, we would move it at the same time. Now, we'll need to select the text individually so we can color it. To do this, click on it, notice it'll select the object too, but wait for this window down here. This is its group window. In the group window, we can find the text just by hovering our cursor over these different icons until it highlights the text. Click on it, and then we've selected the text. Now I can add a metallic material to it to make it look like it belongs on our monument, and I can even move it around independently from our base. We'll go ahead and move it a little bit so it's more in the center. There we go, that looks good. Alright, our monument's pretty much finished. Now if we want to view it so it doesn't have that grid on it, what we can do is we can select the entire thing by clicking and dragging a box around it. This might take a second, and that'll select all of our objects. And then I'm just going to use the Move tool under the Transform tab just to move the entire monument up by quite a bit. I'll just type in like 3000 and push enter. Now we can find our object by pushing the Home button, and it'll zoom into it. This is a useful trick if you wanted to use this for a presentation, or for a book cover, or even if you just wanted to take a picture of the monument. We can also turn off the black outlines around our objects using the Object Visibility button on the right side. This will get rid of those black lines so we have a better view of our monument. In the next video, we'll be taking a 2D image of our monument and then making edits to it with Pixlr Express to make a book cover out of it.